Hello students. In the last lecture, we discussed about the first two variants of Neo-Marxism, that was the world system theory and the Gramscianism. In this lecture, we will discuss the other two variants of Neo-Marxism called the critical theory and Neo-Marxism. At the end, we will make a critical assessment of Neo-Marxism as a theory of international relations. Let us start our discussion with the following outline. First, we will discuss the major assumptions of the critical theory. Then, we will discuss the main arguments of Neo-Marxism. Then, we will see an overall assessment of Neo-Marxism, and finally, end our discussion with some concluding remarks. Now, let us focus on another variant of Neo-Marxism, that is called critical theory. Critical theory developed out of the work of the Frankfurt School. While early thinkers were primarily concerned with the analysis of discrete societies, later theorists like Andrew Linklater have applied critical theory to the study of international politics. So, basically you will find that the idea of critical theory is derived from the research works of the Frankfurt School, and it was Andrew Linklater who applied the critical theory to the study of international politics. Given the vast scope of critical theory writing, what we can do is to introduce some of its key features. So, it is not possible to speak about the critical theory or all the critical theorist writings in an hour or maybe in 2 hours, but what we can do is we can identify some of the features of critical theory. The first feature is, unlike the other Marxists who were interested in the further development of analysis of the economic base of the society, the intellectual concerns of the critical theorist is almost entirely superstructural. So, as I said, they are not interested in the economic base of the analysis, rather they are talking of the superstructure that consists of the political system, social system and many other things. Basically, they focus on the questions related to culture, bureaucracy, social basis of authoritarianism, theories of knowledge and many other issues. So, they are not interested only in economics, and they are particularly focusing on the superstructure consisting of culture, bureaucracy or social basis of dictatorship or maybe theories of knowledge. Second, unlike the classical Marxists who saw in the proletariat the potential for emancipatory transformation, the Frankfurt School thinkers argued that the working class has simply been observed by the system with the rise of the mass culture and increasing commodification of every element of social life, and no longer it represents a threat to the capitalist system. So, unlike the classical Marxists who were particularly interested in the revolutionary potential of the working class or the proletariat, that they will go against the capitalist system, indulge in revolution or initiate a revolution against the capitalist system because they have the revolutionary spirit. Their main concern is that they argue that in a way the working class has been observed by the capitalist system because cultural influence, because of bureaucratic reasons or maybe because of manufactured consent Gramsci was talking about. Third, Marxists have equated emancipation with the process of humanity gaining mastery over nature through sophisticated technology and its use for the benefit of all. So, if you look at the writings of traditional Marxists, they are talking of emancipation, as Marx said, the task of the philosopher is not to analyze, rather to change the world, to change the system. So, that was his kind of understanding about emancipation. But the critical theorists, they differ with this kind of Marxist analysis because Marxist was also, they were interested with a kind of emancipation that was related to gaining mastery over nature through sophisticated technology and its use for the benefit of all. So, the Marxists talked about the technology and how those technology can be used for mastering the nature and how that activity or how that kind of act would benefit all. So, the traditional Marxist kind of emancipation was not just to analyze the things, rather to reform the world, to change the world, and they thought that you can have knowledge, you can have adequate mastery over the nature, and you can get mastery over the nature through technology, and this technological superiority, technological knowledge can help you to master the nature, and that will be beneficial for all. But critical theorists argued that humanity's increased domination over nature has resulted in the domination of other human beings. So when you exploit the nature, when you dominate the nature, in a way that also leads to domination over the subjects, or domination of the power, voiceless people or poor people. We have seen that in case of British colonialism in India. They looted all the resources, they cut down the tree, and they were taking all the resources to Europe. But that kind of exploitation resulted in severe problems with the subjects of the colonies, severe economic problems of the colonies. So if you try to dominate the nature, to overexploit the nature, the nature resources would be used by you for your selfish ends, for your factories, for your country. But what about the people who are deprived of all those resources? So and sometimes you indulge in colonial activities, you indulge in imperial activities, because you think that those resources are needed for your development, and sometimes you go to the extent of subjugation. You can take the example of China's Belt and Road Initiative, how it is connecting different parts of the world, but the main purpose is to use resources, is to borrow resources for its manufacturing capability, for its industries, and you can link those other parts of the world or different parts of the world through this network, and that will help you to better extract the resources, better transport those resources for your own requirement. In contrast, they argued that emancipation has to be conceived of in terms of reconciliation with nature. So you don't need to have a kind of emancipation that is against the nature, rather you need a kind of emancipation that is in terms with nature, that is in peace with nature, and that is in a way reconciliated with the nature, or it is based on reconciliation. So that was their understanding, and this is how they differed from the traditional Marxist on the issue of emancipation. Andrew Linklater has used some of the key principles and precepts developed by the Frankfurt School, especially Habermas. So the point is, these kind of arguments made by the Frankfurt School, especially by Habermas, that was used by Andrew Linklater for analysis of international relations. Emancipation is a key theme for him. He investigates how and to what extent state and the state system facilitates or denies the possibility of human emancipation. So basically he starts with the question that to what extent and how the state and the state system, whether it facilitates emancipation or it denies the possibility of emancipation. That is the question where from he starts. According to him, the state is an exclusionary and inclusionary form of political community. It is based on exclusion, it is also based on inclusion. It is inclusionary because it grants equal rights to every citizen. So if you look at from the perspective of Linklater, you will find that he is talking of both an inclusive state and exclusive state. When the state gives equal rights to its citizens, it is an inclusive state, but when it denies the same kind of rights to the foreigners, to the citizens of other countries, it is an example of an exclusionary state. The emancipatory project of critical theory underscores the limit of the state as a political community. Like Habermas, Linklater believes that individuals have a dual moral identity, one as a citizen of the state and the another, their role as a world citizen. So now we are talking of world citizen, and in the same time you are a citizen of your country, and also you are a human being. You have responsibility, you are moral responsible for other human beings, and that is how you are also a global citizen. So if there is some wrong in Palestine, in Gaza, the people in India, people in other parts of the world, they protest against Israel because they think that what Israel is doing is not as per the requirements of Palestine, or as per the requirements of the Palestinians, or it is against the Palestinians. So that is how if there is any problem in China, if there is any problem in India, if there is any problem in Israel, other people also raise their voice, protest in the way they like. So that shows that as a citizen you have some responsibility towards your country, and also as a global citizen you have some responsibility towards the humanity. So that is how he makes a distinction between the global citizen and the citizen of a country. He investigates the prospect for a new form of political community in which individuals and groups can achieve higher levels of freedom and equality. So, he is against the territorial demarcation of boundaries or the territorial distribution of boundaries that is based on exclusion, So, he is talking of a global political community. So, he is of the view that in the present model of the state system, where the states are considered as the primary actors and individual loyalty is divided, they have to support their state in terms of crisis, also in normal times, and that conflict with their responsibility, with their moral responsibility as a global citizen. So, this is not possible if there is the present state system. So, he is thinking of a new system or new form of political community where as individuals or human beings, as groups, you can achieve high level of freedom and equality. He argues in favor of transforming the political community from the state to the new form of democracy based on cosmopolitan citizenship. So, he is not interested, or he is not talking of the current nation state system, rather he is talking of a different kind of transformation or transforming the political community, resulting in a kind of system, or resulting in a kind of order which is based on cosmopolitan citizenship, which is based on more and more freedom, which is based on equality. So, he is talking of that, and he identifies the development of European Union as representing a progressive and emancipatory tendency in the contemporary world politics through universal concept of citizenship. So, according to Linklater, the European Union is the best example of such kind of political community which is based on global citizenship or universal citizenship. Here the European Union is not based on the kind of exclusion based on the territorial boundaries, although you cannot enjoy, non-European cannot enjoy the benefits of being a citizen of Europe. Again, that is again a limitation of Linklater. But what he is trying to say is, if you overcome the kind of territorial demarcation, or if you come out of the sovereign state system, the supranational organizations like European Union, that is an example where you enjoy more equality, more freedom, and it is based on not on exclusion, although again that is limited to Europe only, but you enjoy more and more rights, more and more privileges, and more kind of emancipation is possible in living in such kind of governance system. This suggests that an important part of the international system in entering into an era in which the sovereign state system, which has for a long time claimed an exclusive hold on its citizens, is beginning to lose some of its preeminence. So, this kind of experiment through the European Union that suggests that the state system has come a long way, and the international system is now entering into an era where you will find the sovereign states, they are giving up some elements of their sovereignty, and it is leading to the formation of supranational organizations like European Union, or maybe to some extent ASEAN, where you will find the citizens are enjoying a better kind of life, better kind of liberty and equality, and the state system, it is losing some of its preeminence. Given the notorious pessimism of the thinkers of the Frankfurt School, the guarded optimism of Linklater speaks a lot about the new change or new kind of transformation that the world is presently witnessing in the form of supranational organizations like the ASEAN or the European Union. Now, let us discuss about Neo-Marxism. Even if there is no correct term for this group of scholars, the fundamental approach that embody is not hard to characterize. Baylis calls this kind of new writers as Neo-Marxists, who have returned to the fundamental tenets of Marxist thought and sought to reappropriate ideas that they regard as having been neglected or somehow misinterpreted by subsequent generations. So, these are the scholars or Neo-Marxists whom Baylis calls as Neo-Marxists, those who are interested in the fundamental ideas of Marxism, and they think that these fundamental ideas have been neglected or somehow misinterpreted by the subsequent generation of Marxists. On this basis, they have sought both to criticize other developments in Marxism and to make their own original theoretical contributions to the understanding of contemporary trends. So, it's a combination of what you can say the foundational principles of Marxism along with their original contributions, and that is how we can call them as Neo-Marxism or Neo-Marxist scholars. One example of Neo-Marxist scholarship is Justin Rosenberg's work on uneven and combined development, which draws on Trotsky's examination of the development of Russia in the global political economy. So, borrowing the ideas of Trotsky, Neo-Marxist scholars like Justin Rosenberg, they talk about uneven and combined development in Marxist theory. Uneven and combined development suggests that rather than all countries following a single path of economic and political development, each country's path will be affected by the international context, that is access to international investment and technology that had not been previously available. So, basically the argument of the Neo-Marxists is that all countries they will follow particularly a single path of economic and political development, but that path is affected somehow by the international context because the kind of technology transfer, the kind of global capital, the kind of trade and investment opportunities that somehow affects your embracing of Marxism or your incorporating the ideas of Marxism. So, that is their main argument. In other words, the context for capitalism in any one country would be set by all other countries that had already embarked on capitalist development. Hence, the process in Russia occurred in the context of capitalist development elsewhere and particularly in the countries of Western Europe. So, that is the main argument that if there is global capitalism, other countries are capitalist, so in a way that also influences your economic model. That was the main argument. So, while Trotsky used the concept of uneven and combined development to analyze the events leading up to the Russian Revolution, Kamran Martin had employed it to consider the history of Iran. So, Kamran has used Trotsky's concept of uneven and combined development in the case of Iran. Criticizing Eurocentric accounts of historical progress that focus on European states as the model for state development, Martin argues that while the study of international relations is crucial to understanding Iran's history, it has to be considered in conjunction with an assessment of Iran's domestic history. So, you can't think of a particular state adopting a particular economic model just on global factors. There are internal dynamics, there are internal factors. So, when you combine the global development with the local dynamics, that will help you to better understand a particular country's model of economic development. So, that is the main argument of Neo-Marxist scholars. Now, let us examine what are the shortcomings of the Neo-Marxist theory combining all the four variants. Like classic Marxism, Neo-Marxism has also been subject to many criticisms. First, Neo-Marxists who blame the Western countries for the underdevelopment of least developed countries display a rather reductionist approach, oversimplifying the situation. That is the main argument, that you blame always the colonializers for everything. So, that can be considered as a kind of conspiracy theory. States that were not subject to Western colonialism such as Liberia or Ethiopia are currently more backward than those of the neighboring colonialized countries. So goes the argument that you can't blame colonialism for everything or imperialism for everything. There are internal factors that are also responsible. So, when you blame others for everything, in a way you overlook your problems, your shortcomings. So, that is the argument. Moreover, the political impact of the West on colonial lands was greater than the economic impact. Say for example, the colonies, they borrowed many ideas from the colonial masters like freedom, like self-determination, like so many other issues and ideas, and that ultimately resulted their freedom struggle and gaining independence. So, we can't deny this aspect also. Some other non-Marxist scholars simply argue that there is not necessarily a positive relationship between underdevelopment and colonial past. So, there is no linkage according to some. If a country is poor and underdeveloped, that may be because of its internal dynamics. So, always blaming the colony or colonial masters is not the right thing. Besides, there are many recently developed countries that have a colonial past but now enjoy a high level of prosperity, such as South Korea, maybe Singapore or Taiwan. So, there are countries, those who were colonialized, but they are now economically much more developed. So, you can take the example of these countries, South Korea, Singapore or Taiwan, maybe other countries. Neo-Marxists, like the classic Marxists, also assume that the socialist system cannot be exploitative. But there are so many examples from the Soviet Union's record in Eastern Europe, where you will find that it was highly exploited by the Soviet Union, it was made underdeveloped by the Soviet Union, it was made dependent on Soviet Union support. So, Soviet Union, Stalinism, kind of dictatorship, everybody knows it. So the problem is, the socialist system is equally exploitative. You can take the example of also the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. There are lots of countries, those who have signed the agreement for the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, but we find countries like Pakistan, like Sri Lanka, like many other countries, including Bangladesh, they are experiencing a lot of problems. It's based on debt policy, and it's also very exploitative. So that has been the main cause of their economic problems. So historical experiences have also clearly showed that except the distribution problem, market dynamics are superior to economic planning in providing wealth and prosperity to the general. So that may be a reason why many countries are following the economic model, liberal economic model. We have seen that even countries like the Chinese, they have in a way they have abandoned the communist method of economy, or what we call command economy, and now they have become more capitalist than countries like India. So you will find so many big tech companies, so many big corporations, transnational corporations in China. So virtually they have become what is called communist political system with a capitalist economy. So they have combined both these different types of systems. So the point is, many critics argue that the the Neo-Marxist or the Neo-Marxist theory is based on something which is not explaining everything, or everything is not fine with Neo-Marxism. There are problems, so we have to look at those problems very seriously. Let us summarize what we have discussed so far. We discussed that the critical theory in international relations draws on a range of theoretical traditions, most notably the Frankfurt School, to question the main assumptions, power structures and interests that underpin the global order. Unlike other Marxists, the intellectual concerns of critical theory are almost entirely superstructural, that is, the culture, bureaucracy, social basis of authoritarianism, theories of knowledge, etc. They criticize realism and liberalism for their state-centric focus and neglect of the broader social and economic forces that shape international relations. They argue that these theories often perpetuate status quo and fail to address the issues of inequality and injustice experienced by most of the countries belonging to the global south. Critical theory is concerned with emancipation, seeking to uncover and challenge the power structures and ideologies that oppress individuals and groups. It aims to create a more just and equitable international order. Drawing on the principles and precepts developed by the Frankfurt School, especially Habermas, Andrew Linklater focuses on the role of community and citizenship in international relations and the potential for a more cosmopolitan democracy. Richard Ashley and R.V.J. Walker criticize the foundational assumptions of the traditional international relations theories and emphasize the importance of language and discourse in shaping international relations. Using the fundamental tenets of Marxist thought, the new Marxists seek to reappropriate the ideas that they regard as neglected or misinterpreted by the earlier varieties of Marxism. Rosenberg emphasizes that domestic developments in states cannot be understood in isolation from international dynamics, as both influence and shape each other. Citing globalization as a manifestation of uneven and combined development, he examines how global capitalism perpetuates uneven development while simultaneously integrating diverse economies into a combined system of economy. His theory helps to explain why some developing countries experience rapid industrialization as in case of the countries of Southeast Asia, while others don't. The interaction between local conditions and global economic pressure leads to what he calls a unique development path. Kamran Martin has applied the concept of uneven and combined development to analyze the historical and socio-political transformation in Iran. Martin explores how Iran's historical encounter with global capitalism and imperialism resulted in an uneven economic development pattern for that country. He argues that unlike Western European countries that underwent relatively continuous and autonomous development, Iran's development was significantly shaped by external pressures and intervention, as we have seen in case of the Islamic Revolution of 1979. In the next lecture, we will discuss about another international relations theory called constructivism. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you once again.